Good afternoon, students. I hope things are fine. So, today we'll be talking about where we left last time. We were doing lung and pleura. So, today we'll be starting from the part where I have ended. And there I remember exactly we were talking about the right lung and left lung and the structures related to their mediastinal surfaces. So, with this note, I like to proceed. And right now I'm showing you the hilum of the lung and the root of the lung where different structures has been organized within this area. And we are expected to be best at these things because this is one of the very important part, and you are expected to do and know a lot about things which are related here. I'm sure everybody is can orientate yourself. You can see where is anterior and you can see where is inferior. Obviously this will be posterior and this will be superior. So now let's start bringing things here. So now this is my mediastinal surface. We are looking from the mediastinal surface to the hilum of a lung. And then this is what? This is exactly the hilum, and the rest is the mediastinal surface of the lung. And let's see how things has been organized here. So what is this fold here? That fold is a sleeve of parietal peritoneum. Which part of the parietal pleura? This is the mediastinal part of the pleura. So this is the parietal pleura, and you can see that the color of this parietal pleura has been changing here. So now let's go further. And that is what? That is the extension, a sleeve, the place where my hilum of the lung is located and where the structures who are entering, the root of the lung, they are entering. Down we have a sleeve, we have an extension. Basically, it allows the freedom, it gives the freedom for for the structures which are located within this hilum of the lung for their expansion, for their other things. And this will act as a barrier. Like, it's not possible one can go from anterior to posterior or from posterior to anterior. So it's a kind of a wall, a boundary, a curtain which is in between. And then let's give it a different color. So what I'm showing you now, you're looking at the parietal pleura, which is reflecting on the lung surface as the visceral pleura. So you can see that this parietal pleura, what it becomes. So basically this is the visceral surface. Now that previously we were looking at the parietal surface, and that is inside. That is the surface of the lung which don't have any of the pleura. It is without pleura. So this greenish thing, this dark green thing is my parietal pleura, and this light color stuff is my visceral pleura. And this part of my lung, which surface, mediastinal surface of the lung, there is no pleura. And that has become, so this area which is bounded by this dark color stuff, that is called the hilum of the lung. So we are basically looking at the concept of lung root and hilum, and it's all schematic. So now we have so many tubes which has been arranged here. And now it's our job to look for that what are these tubes. I'm sure from the color you can pick on so many things, but let's label them. And this one, which is dark gray in color, that's my airway, and I call it bronchus. And then on top of the bronchus, principal bronchus, I have the pulmonary artery, which is superior to that. And we all know this pulmonary artery is coming from where and what it is bringing. It is bringing what? Oxygenated or deoxygenated blood? Think. What should it bring? Any idea? Excellent. Mashallah, you guys are doing good. Now, what are these? So if this was the artery, so these are the veins. And what are they bringing? That's a question. Pulmonary veins, anterior and inferior. What are they bringing? Oxygenated blood. Excellent. Guys, mashallah, you are doing good. I'm really amazed by your preparation and by your responses. Excellent. And now from the top, what should I label it? I should say this is the root. So this is the root, and that's the hilum. That's the hilum. This is the root of the lung. So structures are leaving or entering the surface, the mediastinal surface of my lung. Are we good with that? Good. So now we talk about that. And now look at it. This is We are from, this is a gateway, we are going inward. If we go inside, we are entering into the substance of the lung. So now towards the lung, and that is towards the mediastinum. So this organization, this schematic arrangement should be really needed, because this is the concept. And once we are good with the concept, and now if you'll go to the real cadaveric lung, you'll not be finding difficulty. I know there are so many extra openings, you'll be surprised to see them there. But if you pay attention to this plain, simplest explanation regarding the structures, how they are organized at the hilum of the lung, if you know the basic principle, there are less likely chances that you're going to make any kind of mistake. Okay, now we are fine so far. Let's proceed further. Now, what I have done, I have given these colors to these lungs and I have numbered them. What are these? What is this concept? So, previously we talked about that left lung, because of an oblique fissure, was divided into two lobes, and the right lung, because of two fissures, divided into three lobes. We have seen that. Now, each lung is further divided into a smaller segment, is an individual segment, is an independent segment, and this segment is called bronchopulmonary segment. So that's the bronchopulmonary segment. Are we good with that? So now, and this areas has been numbered. Guys, can you still with me? Are you with me? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So these areas, these numbers, they are called bronchopulmonary segment. Now you remember last lecture, one of your colleague was asking 10 and 9 and this business. I said at that moment, just wait, I'll be explaining. And now if you look at my trachea, when it divides into right and left, look at it. Right is bigger, left is shorter, is narrower, and then everyone has been further divided, and this has also been numbered, and this has also been numbered. Guys, when you open different books, some of them writes right lung has 9, left lung has 10, someone write opposite, vice versa. So be at single one unit, that is we consider 10 and 10. So there should not be any discrepancy. If you find that, simple solution, simple answer, 10 and 10, because that is our limit today. Fine. Tomorrow, when you'll be coming a cardiothoracic surgeon, then we'll talk of different things. But at the moment, at your level, just remember 10 and 10 bronchopulmonary segments are there in both the sides. For further detailing, we'll be talking about that, and we'll not be going in individual details of that. Basically, what is recommended from this lecture about the lung is everyone should know that what is a bronchopulmonary segment as a unit. No matter is number 1 or number 2 or number 3 or number 4 or number 5, either on right side or left side. So we need to understand that what is a bronchopulmonary segment out of a lobe. And as I have said, we have 10, and it is written down on top of the slide, the smallest resectable portion of the lung. So we can cut this part of the lung from a lung, and the rest of the lung remains functional. There will be no effect over to the performance of a living lung. So that is its significance. That is its importance. So it is the smallest resectable part. If we can take this chunk out of a lung surface, it will not be, yeah, thank you. So it will not be bothering to our patients. And at certain location, we need to do that. You remember, the lung cancer is one of the, doctor, can we only remove one segment? No, you can move more than one segment. It up to you. But this has been said that this is a smaller resectable portion. We can remove, let's say somebody has a cancer. Let me make it simple. If somebody has a cancer in the right lung and it has been identified, the cancer is being located in bronchopulmonary segment 1, 2, and 3. So we can resect 1, 2, and 3 without disruption, without causing any functional loss of remaining units of the lung. So the lung will remain functioning and we'll be doing a partial lobectomy. This term will be used. So we'll be taking a segment out. Do we grow back? It's not coming back. Liver is a different thing, lung is a different thing. But the concept of bronchopulmonary segment is that this unit is independent, and if this unit is diseased for any reason, if we have to remove it, we can take it out, and the lung functional functions will not be affected at all. It's not like liver. Don't compare it with the liver. Okay, now let's proceed. And what you should know, some Sana is writing, how will the lung won't be affected? There will be less air if we remove that. Thank you, Sana, for asking this question. Now tell me, if someone has a cancer in lobe 1 on the right side, will you leave it there because person can breathe nicely and this cancer can spread further and further and further? What do you think, Sana? I need your answer. Thank you very much. So we can basically, this is a blessing to humankind, that if one part is affected, one part is diseased, you can take it out and the remaining lung will still function. Obviously, the quality of function will decrease, but surviving from a cancer, how you think about that? That's important, and that we need to understand, because we are not talking theory, we are talking about practicality. So now, what we need to do, guys, if you have studied lung and you don't know what is a bronchopulmonary segment, it means you haven't done anything. So now let's proceed. What is a bronchopulmonary segment? Let's look at that. So now, with that, I have just bring this schematic version, and let's label it first. So basically I'm representing one bronchopulmonary segment in front of you, and let's see how many structures we can find here. So this is important, so I need to read it for you. A bronchopulmonary segment is a structurally separate and functionally independent unit of lung tissue. It has its own segmental bronchus. It has its own personal bronchus and a branch of pulmonary artery. So this pulmonary artery is for gaseous exchange. The pulmonary vein and lymphatic travel in intersegmental septa. So these are my intersegmental septa. They can be shared, but the main thing is it has its own principal bronchus and it has its own pulmonary artery. And what is being shared between from the others? Pulmonary vein and lymphatic. Intersegmental septa and share between the segments. So the lung parenchyma within the segment is supplied by bronchial arteries. You remember when we were talking about the blood supply of the lung, I said the bronchial artery are the one who are supplying oxygenated blood to the lung tissue. Gases exchange through the pulmonaries, but the supplies for the lung and the pleura from the bronchioles and drained by the bronchial veins. So word bronchus and the word pulmonary should be very clear in your minds. Pulmonary used for gaseous exchange for the whole of the body, and bronchial is the arteries which supplies tissue of the lung, the veins which drain tissue of the lung, and each lung has 10 bronchopulmonary segments, period. We are not going in that discussion 9 and 10. So to make your life easy. Now, what is that? What is this area? What should we label it? We call it visceral pleura. I'm sure everybody knows about the visceral pleura. Going further, what are these? I mentioned earlier, these are the intersegmental septum. So this is one bronchopulmonary segment of my lung. There will be in the neighborhood another bronchopulmonary segment, another bronchopulmonary segment. So this is how my lung, right side or left side, have 10 such units. And these units are called bronchopulmonary segment. And right now we are dissecting the anatomy of a bronchopulmonary segment. Okay, guys. So now what is this structure? We all know this is the continuation of my trachea, the bronchus, and then it divides and divides and divides till it reaches its terminal part where we have gaseous exchange. So we call it segmental bronchus. And after the segmental bronchus, we have bronchioles. That becomes terminal bronchiole. And then ultimately, we have respiratory bronchioles where we have gaseous exchange occurring. This is occurring where? Within my respiratory tree. And then what are these? These are my alveoli, where we have oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange is occurring. And then what is the structure? If you remember, if you refer to my previous slide, this color was given to what? Think. This color was used for which structure which was entering the hilum of the lung? Pulmonary artery. Excellent. Mashallah, you guys are ready. So this is pulmonary artery and it brings what? Deoxygenated blood. Excellent. So what we have said, a bronchopulmonary segment is a structurally separate, functionally independent unit of the lung tissue, supplied by its own segmental bronchus. So this is its personal segmental bronchus and have its own pulmonary artery. So this is a personal, dedicated for this bronchopulmonary segment. It can be number 1, number 2, number 3 till number 10, maybe right side, maybe left side. Yeah, don't mix Mariam histology and all that. I use this terminology. There is no change. It's the same. Now, what is that? So it is bringing deoxygenated blood. From where? From my heart. Which part of my heart? Right ventricle of the heart. It pumps through this and it reaches from the pulmonary trunk to the pulmonary arteries, and then it will be reaching down and down and down. Yes, Reela. So now what is that? We talk about something is being shared. And what is being shared? Pulmonary veins. We know that pulmonary veins are taking oxygenated blood. These are the only different names which has been used in our body. So they have been shared. That's why they are covering both the sides and the lymphatics. So they have been shared. So this is my pulmonary vein and this is how it takes out. And this is how the pattern of the lymphatics. So lymphatic is being shared from the neighboring bronchopulmonary segment, and I hope we should be clear about that. So if we take a unit of the lung, and that unit we call it a bronchopulmonary segment, where it has its own personal bronchus and it has its own pulmonary artery, but the pulmonary vein and the lymphatics has been shared with the neighboring bronchopulmonary segment. So this whole thing is called a bronchopulmonary segment. Guys, this is really, really, really important. If somebody asks you a question from the lung, if you don't ask about a bronchopulmonary segment, it means he's not asking about the lung. So you need to be that much prepared for this structure. So now these are the lymphatic vessels, and this is what? What is this? This is a separate thing. We didn't talk about it yet. This is what? This is my bronchial artery, the artery which brings blood for this lung tissue to survive. Thank you very much. Bronchial artery. And then we'll be having bronchial veins as well. Are we good so far? Okay, guys. So bronchopulmonary segments are important clinically. A good working knowledge of a bronchopulmonary segment is important for carrying out effective postural drainage of lung for infectious and renders relatively bloodless segment or wedge resection for bronchiectasis and for tumors possible since the planes between the individual segments are relatively avascular. Next, we will study the lymphatic drainage. So, if lymphatics are shared to limit spread of cancer, we have to remove the lobe next to it as well. It depends if the cancer has been spreaded. When we talk about a cancer, then we have to first we diagnose, yes, there is a cancer in the lung. Then the second question which patient asks always, doctor, how long I will survive? The answer will come, we have to do a workout where we'll stage your disease. If it is confined to a segment or it has been spread in the segment, it has confined to an organ or it has spread to the body. So on the basis of that, we can say simple resection and then little bit chemotherapy, radiotherapy, you are fine with that. But if the disease has widely spread out in the different areas, then we cannot. Okay, Umar is asking, why doesn't the bronchial artery directly drain to the pulmonary vein? Gentlemen, the bronchial thing is for the supply of the tissue, and the pulmonary is only for, these are those vessels who are bringing oxygenated and carrying deoxygenated stuff, and the bronchial is for the supply. Let me tell you one thing. How is avascular? Because do you see any blood supply here? So the living of this tissue, if this is being cut, this part will still be functioning if this bronchial artery is working, because bronchial artery is the artery which supplies this lung parenchyma, that you need to understand, and this pulmonary stuff that is responsible for gaseous exchange. So this is how it is avascular. So this is an avascular plane. If we resect it out, there will be not, and I have used a term relatively avascular. I didn't say completely avascular. So please read everything with full context. It's a relatively avascular structure. It's not a completely avascular structure. What vein does the bronchial vein eventually drain into? You can figure it out, Fiham, yourself, that these bronchial veins ultimately they join, and then we can figure it out automatically afterwards. Okay, guys. So now we talk about how how do the surgeon find the intersegmental septum? Yes, Aya, they are trained people. They have a CT scan. They have everything, and there are so many ways. If you allow me to talk about that, then I need enough time, which I don't have at the moment. But I'm sure I love to answer you. Ask me separately. I can tell you the techniques how we can find that way, how we can segmentalize and how we can isolate the different organs, and then we can remove the partial resections, partial lobectomies can be carried out. Bronchopulmonary segment can be removed and the lung function will not be impaired. Okay, so we talk about this innervation of the pleura. I need not to go in detail. I spent good time during the structure of the week session. There, we just a quick recap: mediastinal pleura, costal pleura, and the diaphragmatic pleura, which has been shown to you, and you are expected to be knowing which nerves are supplying where, and that has been emphasized a lot. Phrenic nerve, and then the subcostal, intercostal nerves, and all this, and the visceral pleura. We talk about the autonomic supplies. So, guys, you are expected to be very good with these concepts. They are really, really, really important. Okay, now let's coming back to the airway. We breathe in, we inhale, the air passes through this tube, wind tube, and that is my trachea. And trachea, you can see it bifurcates at the fourth thoracic vertebrae into left and right principal bronchi, and then it divides and divides and divides for each bronchopulmonary segment. In a simple word, I can say the right divides into 10 and left divides into 10 to correspond to its bronchopulmonary segmental level. Guys, bronchopulmonary segment, don't forget it. This is something really, really, really ace it. Now, let's put the things. We are good with that. This is the left lung and that's the right lung. Why I'm saying that? We can see we have the basis for these fissures. One fissure and two fissure. And then I have three lobes and two lobes. So right lung and left lung. And there you can see the trachea coming down and dividing. That's my trachea. And this place we call it T4, T5 level. We call it what? We call it carina. So at that level, they divide. Thank you very much. You guys are mashallah smart. So now, and it has its clinical significance. I'll be coming on that. And look at it. The right lung, if you see that the right principal bronchus is wider, shorter, less angular. And the left one is narrower. Left one is narrower. Guys, can you excuse me for a while? So now you should be knowing about it. Why this is longer, why this is shorter, why this is less angular, because there is a lot related to that, and I'll be talking about that shortly. So the right main principal bronchus is going for the 3 and the left one going for the 2. This one divides and enter, right one divides and enter, left one enter and then divides. So now right principal bronchus is shorter. Guys, don't forget these lines. It's written in red. Is shorter, wider, more vertical than the left. Therefore, if we inhale, we aspire any object, a child, you are eating a peanut, more likely chances it will be lodged in the right principal bronchus as compared to the left, because left is reverse, is longer, narrower, and less. It is more vertical. You can see that it's more vertical, it's more transverse. So there are more chances that structure will be any inhaled foreign body. You can choke yourself, and any particle, anything, any food content can come and lodge here. You take something, some people, those who have problem with their mental status, they can, the dentures and all those things, they can fall down. And when we are hunting for them, our first target is look into the right side, because this is more susceptible and it's more aligned with the alignment of my trachea. That is an important part. We should not be ignoring that, and it's one of the favorite thing to be always asked. Now, going further, what do we have behind the trachea? We all know we have esophagus, and you can see in this image. And then what this red line is doing, I have just make a section, and let's see on a cross section. This is my trachea. It's not a complete ring, it's a partial ring. I'm sure you have been explained in larynx, the complete ring and the partial rings. Out of my whole airway, there is only one ring which is the complete, and that is cricoid. Rest of the all rings are, they are incomplete. All cartilages are incomplete. How incomplete? You can see that it's cartilage from the sides, cartilage from the front, but the back there is a muscle. You need to be good at it. And who lives? So this is my incomplete hyaline cartilage ring, and this is my trachealis. This muscle has a name. It's a smooth muscle. It's located posteriorly. So it's been there, and it's connect these two ends of the tracheal rings. And then who lives here? A collapsed tube that is called esophagus. And this esophagus only opens when the bolus of the food is descending down, going towards the stomach from my oral cavity. You are expected to be good with these, and it is always related to the posterior surface of the trachea. Who is related? Esophagus. I'm sure you need to be good with these things. And now the lobar bronchi divides into segmental bronchi, and then we talk about 10 bronchopulmonary segment. And segmental bronchi undergo further division into progressive smaller airway called bronchioles, terminal, and respiratory bronchioles. A bulla term is also been used for those. Now, we are looking from the front, how a trachea look like, and we are looking from the back. And there is the larynx is also been attached. And now what I was telling you, look at all these cartilages. Shaza is asking, if someone inhale foreign object, what will happen to the right lung? Obviously, Shaza, when this lung is being blocked here, no air will be going there and no air will be coming out. So this lung will gradually will collapse, and patient has all the symptomatology when there is less oxygenation. So you can figure it out yourself. So any part of my tree, bronchial tree, if it is blocked beyond further, that area will not be functional. So it will not be working. So gaseous exchange will not be happening that part. And when there is no gaseous exchange, means we have less supply. Obviously, that part will supply because bronchial arteries are there, and they will be taking care of that part. Lean is saying it lead to tension pneumothorax. No, Lean, it will not lead to tension pneumothorax because air is not going further. No one is entering. The tension pneumothorax is a different philosophy. I'll be revisiting it again today, and you need to be connected with that. Okay, so we are looking from the front and we are looking from the back. And now what I was emphasizing when I get into this question, look at it. All the cartilages, no matter they belong to the larynx or they belong to the trachea, they are incomplete except for this one, which is cricoid cartilage. That's the only complete ring. Rest, all of them are incomplete. You can see throughout, right up to the end, right from the beginning. None of them are a complete ring. There's a gap in between, and there's a muscle, a membrane which fills in this area. That we need to be very clear about it. And here we have made a window so we can see inside how the mucosal lining within my trachea. And there, in respiratory part, in the histology, they must have explained a lot about the movements and the cilias and all those things. Now, look at it. What happened? Segmental bronchial, it has cartilages, and then it goes down and down and down and down and down till it becomes an alveolar sac. And look at it, this part has been magnified. Look at it how it's been magnified, and the elastic fibers are surrounding because we don't have cartilages beyond this point. So it is the cartilage free zone, and look at it, this is the terminal part where gaseous exchange is occurring. Are we good with that? So this you need to understand. This is how my bronchial tree ends, and these balls are the area where we have this gaseous exchange occurring at that level. So Lena, Shaza, answering your question again, if it's been blocked here, so no air is coming, so this segment will not be effective for what? For gaseous exchange. And that what I was trying to tell you, each bronchopulmonary segment has its own tree. So if we remove that, if that part is diseased, we can close it here, we can close the artery, and we can take it out, and rest of the lung will function as is. Obviously there will be little problem with the, it's not 100%, but we have 90%. We can see somebody is surviving. So the segment bronchiole are the last part of the, thank you very much. So trachea don't have cartilage at the back only because esophagus is placed behind. No Lean, because none of the ring is complete. So there is there is a, there is a philosophy behind. I cannot go in those detail at the moment, but just simply remember, all the tracheal rings are C-shaped. They are not a complete ring. Now, lymphatic drainage of the lung, guys, this is a very important. Why Shada is asking what's the difference between pulmonary alveolar and alveolar sac? I think we can talk later about that. Let me focus on that. Otherwise, I don't have any other lecture, so I can complete my content, and I have a lot to talk today. I will answer you. Don't worry for that. So, lymphatic drainage of the lungs, guys. Lung is cancer of the lung is the number one killer of human beings, and we need to be good. If anybody is diagnosed of having a lung cancer, the first thing comes, how long I will survive. And then if we are not good with the information, lymphatic drainage, then we cannot understand how we can stage a cancer, that you are in a grade 1 disease, grade 2 disease, grade 3 disease, and then each grade of the disease has a different plan. Grade 1 disease, obviously it's a minimal disease, we can go for a surgery, we can do a resection, and the patient can have a good life for a good number of days, good number of years. But as the we enter into stage 2, stage 3, then we can say, fine, you have only 6 months, you have only 1 year. So from where doctor is getting these infos? Once doctor knows the lymphatic drainage of that pertinent organ, and this is meaningful when we are learning the process of what, of staging a cancer. And that's important, because tomorrow you will be practicing all these things, and people will be asking you these questions right away, right and left. So at which level and surface landmarks does the physician perform a you write you Hadi, write the right word. Are you asking tracheostomy? Because you are writing tracheotomy. Tracheostomy. Hadi, again, I'm saying, I have seen mediastinal tracheostomies has been done even. So there are so many things, but just live at your level that we are doing in the upper part. But one need arise, we can do everything. If patient has cancer of larynx and it's going down, then we can go down and down and down, and that's a long topic. Okay, guys. So now what is important for us, the lymphatic drainage of the lung begins in the superficial subpleural plexus. So this plexus is living under my pleura, which drains into deep pulmonary plexus within the parenchyma of the lungs, and thence into groups of lymph nodes. So ultimately from the superficial to deep, and ultimately into the lymph nodes. So let's put things here. Okay. So now look at it. I started the journey. The journey has begun. Superficial subpleural plexuses. This is level 1. And then it goes to the deep pulmonary plexuses. And then it is going towards the lymph nodes. And these lymph nodes are widely scattered all across. So this is level 2. Bronchopulmonary or hilar nodes. And guys, these are the nodes. When we look into X-ray chest, these nodes are visible, and we can hilar shadows the blood vessels plus these lymph nodes. And if they are enlarged, they can become very obvious. On CT scan and MR, we can pick them up and we can stage the disease. And then you can see this is how the lymphatic, it travels. And now, these are the very important lymph nodes. They sit under my bifurcation of the trachea. And if the cancer cells has reached to this part, so by their enlargement, what happens? This carina get distorted. And when I do a bronchoscopy, when I put a camera through my nose into my airway, I can see that the carina is being distorted. So I can simply say, and even I can have a biopsy from these lymph nodes, and I can have the evidence, oh, cancer cells has reached to that part. So carina, this is the significance of the carina, that on a bronchoscopy, if carina is distorted, we should be thinking of something really, really, really bad. Now this is level 3, and these are my inferior tracheobronchial nodes. Guys, you are expected to be good with these levels and these names. And then on the sides, what should be name given to them? Superior tracheobronchial. So these were superior and these were inferior. Tracheobronchial with the trachea and with the bronchi. Are we good with that? Can carina distortion appear? No. Rila, for carina, looking into carina, we have to put a scope in. Next slide, I'll be showing you how we do it. Look at it. Non-lymphatic goes upwards. It's parallel to my trachea. So we should give a name similar to that, and we call it paratracheal nodes. We can figure it out ourselves. Superficial to deep to bronchopulmonary, to the superior and inferior tracheobronchial, and then to the paratracheal nodes. And this is how it traverses. And then they are going right bronchomediastinal trunk on the right side, and left one is going respectively. To the left, broncho. So if somebody asks you how the lymphatic travels within the lung parenchyma, so you can start your journey from this superficial subpleural plexus to this. This is how the lymphatic drainage is following the complete pathway within my lung and the alveoli and the tracheal tree. And this you are expected to be good with these concepts. And look at it. Now we have what? We have the veins. And look at it. We are looking at the internal jugular and subclavian veins. They are joining to make my brachiocephalic veins. Left is long, right is short. That we need to know. And we all know that this is where they are opening, they are connecting. So ultimately, my right and left bronchomediastinal trunks, they are opening into a brachiocephalix. Now, look at it. Within the lung tissue, lung parenchyma, subpleural, and this is how they follow each of the track. Look at a complete, I have drawn a complete subdivision and division and division and division of a bronchus from the trachea, and look at it. This is how the lymphatic, it travels like, it looks like a leaf to me, like so many branches and trunks, and everything is being directed, and ultimately it's heading towards these nodes. And if the cancer cell has been reached to these nodes, they are involved. So this carina is distorted. By putting a simple bronchoscope, you can see that carina is distorted. So you can estimate the cancer cell has reached to this level. So this will helpful for staging a cancer. And then you can plan what treatment is optimal for this patient after having a tissue diagnosis. What is tissue diagnosis? You take a biopsy, you take a sample, and then you react accordingly. I hope we are fine with that. So now again, re-emphasizing, showing you the close relationship of the nerves and the brachial and these lymph nodes. And once these lymph nodes have been distorted, they may cause compression. So Abdullah is asking, Dr. Lymph nodes has macrophages. How come the cancerous cells are not being phagocytized? These are cancer cells. These are not ordinary debris or anything. They try their level best, but they eat all these things, and cancer cells are, they are, if that was that easy, then nobody could have been dying from a cancer, because this system is not that effective. Initially they do their best, but it's beyond, because and it, the cancer grows like a wildfire which has no control. You remember last year there was a big fire in Australia, and where they tried for months, and then it was difficult to control. In US there is a lot more location where they have wildfires, and there's no way to, and they bring helis and everything, and then they're trying. So it's same like that. Once it's been spreading, it's spreading like a wildfire. Okay, guys. Now I'm bringing an X-ray for you. What you're looking in this X-ray? I need your replies, guys, quick. Tumor, excellent. Sharif. Soft tissue, so a mass, excellent. This should be the answer. We don't know what it is, so we can say safely a mass, a tumor. Carcinoma, saying carcinoma, Rania, we need to have a tissue diagnosis. We need to have a biopsy of this, and then under microscope we can see that what type of things is it the same thing which should be there or not, and then we can say what it is, from where it's coming. So very right, excellent. You guys are good, and you're doing good job. So Pancoast tumor, yeah, we'll work on that. Don't worry for that. Relax. So guys, this is, we are looking at the cancer of the lung. It can be any type. Look at it. So this is that cancer which was visible. Look at those inferior lymph nodes. And what were these? Look at the carina has been distorted. Even these are also been involved. So cancer is been approaching, not only organ confined, but it has gone to the lymph nodes. So this is not a stage 1 disease. So distortion of the trachea and widening of the carina. You can see that how it has been widened up, and this has been compressing on that. So patient will be presenting all those things. Now what we see here, somebody is doing, this is the bronchoscopy. A consultant is doing a bronchoscopy, and this is that instrument. We insert this nose, this tip, it has a camera, and so many things are there, and it's going through the nose to my airway, to all the bronchiole. We can, and this goes to the source, to the monitor, and everything is visible even from an eye, or you can see on a big screen. Are we fine? So this is a bronchoscope, And this is how we can go inside, we can wash, we can take biopsies, we can see it very nicely, we can install things. So there's a lot is happening there. Now, what next? So now look at it. Same process, and you can see this bronchoscope. It has gone. Now this is another way. It's not passed through the nose. It has been passed through the oral cavity. But we can direct this tube from the larynx into the airway, and then you can see this bronchoscope is going all the way to the lung, and inside you can see that how you can push on this side, you can push on that side. Look at it. These are the balloons. They have inflated these balloons, so secretion should not be coming, and there should be an easy workout. So they have blocked this lung, and they are looking for the diagnosis. So we can approach each and every part of the lung parenchyma through these bronchioles. Would the bronchoscope not damage the airway lining? There will be a little bit damage, but it is always been repaired. That's not a problem. Now, when we are putting this, we can find, see, this tells me I'm at the level of my vocal folds. I'm in the larynx. And when we are going down, we can see the normal, and we can see if there was some unusual growth, a tumor. This is a biopsy forceps. So you take a chunk of the tissue, and then you can see the narrowing of the trachea. You can see there is some carcinoma, and look at the bronchiolits. There can be a stone. There are so many variants, and you look at it. These are the different views which you can be captured by putting this instrument in, and you can see what is happening. Is it normal or is it abnormal? So this pattern will be evident, and you can see everything very nicely. And these are the different images to help you to understand how a patient can breathe during a bronchoscopy. Have we closed his nose? The other one is functioning. So there is, and bronchoscopy is not something which you can look at it. What is this tube all for? There is something is being maintained. So this has been endotracheal tube, and look at it, this red tube. It has so many channels. One is used for this instrument, and look at it, this lung is functioning through this tube, is breathing. Look at this, is being connected to the oxygen. So person is breathing, that's not a problem. And he's using one channel. If he want to go to the other lung, he can use the other channel. So this tube has even 2 lumens inside. So there are so many technicalities. So I'm sure I have answered you. Is the syringe for fluid expansion of the tubes? Yes, excellent. So when we push the fluid, so it can give me, so it means when I'm pushing from here, I can pushing some fluid here. When I'm pushing some fluid here, it will dilate, and I can have more vision. If I see there is more secretion, I may suck it out. So there are so many functions, so many things can be involved. Look at his fingers. He is basically an artist. He's playing, and there are so many buttons under his fingers, and he's playing all these buttons, and they are giving him so many informations. Okay, guys. So now there's a task for you. Quickly, you're given an X-ray. What do you think? What are you looking in this X-ray, guys? Quickly. I need your response for this X-ray. Any comments? Effusion, hemothorax, mass. No. It's hemothorax. Those who are talking effusion and hemothorax, they are perfect. Excellent, guys. Good job. So now we can see that primarily what we are supposed to see here. Look at it. So look at it. This angle. Which angle? This morning I have showed you this X-ray, similar X-ray. But there was a very obvious costodiaphragmatic recess was shown. Costodiaphragmatic angle was shown. But here, where is this thing? This is all, the fluid has been filled up. It could be a pleural effusion. It could be a hemothorax, pylothorax, chylothorax. So all these possibilities are there. And trachea is diverted, yes, because there is so much pressure on this side. You can see that it's been deviated a little bit on this opposite side. So left pleural effusion obliterating much of the lower lung marking. We can see that. So there is another task. What is that? Yeah, it could be a tumor, and look at it. Don't you see here? Look, everything. What about this angle, guys? You see a good angle here. Where is this angle? Yeah, could be could be pleural effusion. Could be pleural effusion. Excellent. Pyothorax. Yes, all of you are right. So this angle is fine, and this angle is obliterated. And that I want you to understand. Are we clear? So you can see a localized intralobular fluid collection that has been marked with here. And then this is where the angle has been. This is a pleural effusion. Cardiomegaly, yes, excellent. Yeah, this is what is needed from you guys, that you should not look at only one angle. You should look here, you should look here, you should look here, Everything should be evident, and that shows you are Al Faisal students because you're smart. Excellent, good job. So now, what do you see here, guys? I need your answers again. Fluid, hemothorax, pleural effusion. So guys, if somebody has this effusion, when this person will breathe, what will happen? What will happen when this person will breathe? I'm reading your answer, keep writing. Compressed lung, what will happen when breathing? Pain. Pain. Will parietal pleura is not involved? So if there is an inflammation, pain will also be there. So effusion gives you, how I know that someone has effusion? I have wheeze, I have pain, that's very common. And then gradually lung get collapsed. But the first sign is the pain. And then the story begins. Gradually lung goes, mashallah, you guys are on a good track. It gradually affects, Momo. Okay, guys. Now there is another task. What do you see here? So we can see here normal side, mediastinum, collapsed lung. We talked about this X-ray before. I just bring it here for your quick understanding. I'm sure everybody is good. And if you're not good, please look into these things. These are important and we love to ask these stuff. Okay, now this is a normal X-ray chest. I don't want to talk. Dr. Sadia has spent good time on this stuff. How a PA view appears, what are the different landmarks? You need to be good at those on a lateral view, on a PA view. Okay, guys, we talk about this case during our structure of the week. We did this dissection. We talk about that. We did here. We talk about this, the difference between a normal X-ray and another X-ray. And I'm sure you guys are good with those things. Now, what I'm trying to discuss here, we said that the lung is being collapsed. We established that this is a case of what? Tension pneumothorax. Tension pneumothorax. Look, the tracheal shift. Don't forget that part. Absent sounds, everything. So then we said, this is the situation. We talk about the valves. We talk about the pleura and its anatomy. I'm not repeating it again because I have spent time on that. So what is my interest today, talking again on this same subject? So we covered all these parietal pleura and visceral pleura, their nerve supplies, venous drainage and everything. And then we said pneumothorax, what is happening? Plain pneumothorax. And then the tension pneumothorax, we established these facts. It's just a repetition. But then we were inserting chest tube. And we all know insertion of chest tube, no matter for pneumothorax, hemothorax, chylothorax, pyothorax, we select one commonly acceptable place. That was, what was this space? And tell me the line. In between fifth or sixth intercostal space at mixed axillary line. Excellent. You guys are so good. I'm really impressed. Now, we need to look into some factor here. I talked about that this is the area where we should be going. And now what is happening? Now look at it. So this is the triangle, safe triangle. This is also called safe triangle. And why we call it safe triangle? To understand that, look at it. This is where my pectoralis major. When the hand is up, this is where the pectoralis major. This is where the latissimus dorsi. This is my fifth intercostal space. And what is this BA? Any idea? Think of it. So now if we go this area, this is my mid-axillary line. So if I'm going through that, will I be going through the pectoralis major? Yeah, base of the axilla, excellent. So will I be going through the pectoralis major? No. Will I be going through the latissimus dorsi? Will I be going anything else? What else I can go through? What is this? Serratus anterior, excellent. So I'll be going through serratus anterior. Then I'll be going through intercostal muscles. So any of them. So So if I'm going through that, I'm only causing little bit puncture within my serratus anterior. I'll not be causing to anyone else. So that's my safe area. That's why we prefer that. I'll be causing minimal damages. So this is why we choose this place for chest tube insertion. We cut it. I have a short video I'll be sharing with you shortly. So now this is the label, and you can see that fifth intercostal space and all that which we are interested should be knowing it. So if we are entering through mid-axillary line, you need to be good. How long thoracic nerve is far away? Thank you very much, because it's somewhere here. It's not coming to that far. That's why we, the whole surgery, the whole practice is all about safety. Okay, guys, we talk about these lines. Mid-clavicular line, we know that where lung ends, where pleura ends, and from the back where lung ends, where pleura ends, and from the side where lung ends, where pleura ends. Now, someone you are asking me a question. We always say when we doing for pleural tap, we go from the back. Now we may use, ideally we should use mid-scapular line, but we may use posterior scapular line. Sometimes people use paravertebral line, but the thing is we should be very clear about that. We should be going below, like this is these two spaces between 10 to 12. So that should be our hunt. We can use any line, and we don't have any vital organs. Let me go back a little bit. If I'm going for the chest tube insertion, and if I'm going down from the right side, even I'm putting a needle, I have fair enough chance I may enter into the liver. I have shown in my previous slides. So guys, you need to be connected to that. What are the significances and what is happening in these areas? Okay. So now these spaces, we are fine with that. When do we insert a tube from the back? Okay. Abdul Malik, if we insert a tube from the back, tell me how this patient will sleep. And what is the benefit? If I go from a side, I can direct my tube backwards. So I don't need to push my tube from the back. You need to be clear about that. And these other spaces, I just put it for your reminder that you should be connected with that. We know about this, how we are following. Now, I think I should show you, I should share with you I'm bringing a video for you guys.
Of a chest tube is to identify the insertion site. The insertion site is the fifth intercostal space just anterior to the mid-axillary line on the affected side. This can be found by using the nipple level as a landmark for the fifth intercostal space. In females, always be aware that the nipple may be displaced inferiorly due to large pendulous breasts. In this case, remember to stay above the inferior mammary fold where the nipple would normally lie. With the patient lying supine, position the hand up and over the ipsilateral shoulder and secure it in this position to keep it out of the surgical field. Surgically prep and drape the chest at the predetermined site of tube insertion. Using a small gauge needle, locally anesthetize the skin and subcutaneous tissue and the periosteum of the underlying rib. If possible, the pleura just past the rib should also be anesthetized. Make a 2 to 3 centimeter transverse incision parallel to the line of the ribs at the predetermined site with the number 11 scalpel. Bluntly dissect the subcutaneous tissue with the scissors or hemostat. Dissect over the top of the underlying rib until the next highest intercostal space is encountered. With the tip of the hemostat, puncture the parietal pleura while pushing just at the top border of the rib. You must always enter the pleural space over the top of the rib to avoid damaging the neurovascular bundle that lies along the groove at the inferior border of each rib. Be sure to enter the pleura in a controlled fashion to avoid lacerating the lung with the hemostat. Once inside the pleura, spread the hemostat widely and withdraw it while still open to create a sufficient opening in the pleura for the chest tube. Before inserting the chest tube, place your finger into the hole of the pleura. Move your finger around 360 degrees to confirm correct location in the pleural space by feeling the lung and making sure that there are no adhesions or impediments to placing the chest tube. A large chest tube, a number 36 or number 40 French, is used in trauma to allow for the evacuation of blood and clots. Clamp the proximal and distal ends of the tube before insertion. The distal clamp will keep any blood from rushing out before it can be connected to a collection chamber. The proximal clamp will assist in chest tube insertion, but may not always be necessary or helpful. Advance the chest tube into the pleural space to the desired length. All of the drainage holes should be well inside the chest cavity to provide a proper seal and prevent leakage. The chest tube should be positioned posteriorly and aimed superiorly in the chest cavity. This will allow for maximum drainage in the supine position. It may be possible to see fogging of the chest tube with expiration, and it may be possible to listen for improved air movement on the affected side. Connect the end of the tube to an underwater seal apparatus collection chamber.
Okay guys, so now I have shared this video with you guys, and do you have any questions emerging from this video where I was trying to show you